Welcome. We are going live to Spain as people have taken to the streets to protest against the illegal criminal actions carried out by the United States against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in the early hours of Saturday, and the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores. Citizens have gathered here in Spain near the U.S. Embassy to denounce the illegal and criminal actions carried out by the Trump administration and to demand the return of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores back to the homeland of Bolivar, back to Venezuela, and return to the Miraflores Palace, where the people of Venezuela voted for their president to be. The people, this is one more of many expressions of solidarity that Venezuela has received in the past 30 hours, as soon as the news broke out of the illegal and criminal attacks against the Bolivarian nation and the kidnapping of the president and first combatant. People from all over the world have taken to the streets to show their support, to condemn the illegality, to condemn the criminal attacks and the imperialist attacks of the United States against a sovereign nation, and to denounce the continued violations of the United States of the UN Charter and international order. These attacks, which set a very dangerous precedent for the international system, putting at risk the stability of the system itself, as the United States is sending a message that no one is safe from the United States' greed and wrath when they decide to take over the natural resources of a sovereign country, as is in the case of Venezuela. This is coming for the last 28 weeks. Venezuela has been subjected to a constant siege and military threats of attack, which also violates the UN Charter. The UN Charter, must recall, that not only forbids the use of force, but also the threat of use of force to try to subdue a foreign nation, to try to impose the foreign policies of a nation on another, or to try to trigger a regime change by force. This all goes against all the legality and norms that exist that rule over the relationship among states. So this is another expression of solidarity that is being sent by the peoples of the world. In this case, as we're saying in Spain, we're seeing hundreds of people gathering on the streets to condemn the U.S. attacks on Venezuela and kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores. We're seeing the people there gather with different flags, the Venezuelan flags, the Palestinian flags, because in a way, people have always warned that what was happening in Gaza was the beginning of the breakdown of the international system. We must recall that what is happening in Gaza right now is a clear genocide being committed by the Israeli regime, and it's a genocide being committed in the eyes of the entire international community that has done very little and doesn't have done much. But the international community, we refer, of course, by the international organizations that were created exactly for this kind of purpose, to prevent these kind of atrocities to occur, because as we know, the Palestinian people have received also an overwhelming support by the people of the world, by social movements, social organizations, humanitarian organizations and humanitarian movements. They have condemned and denounced the genocide that is happening in Gaza and have demanded an end to it. But the institutions that are supposed to put an end to this, to solve this kind of issue, and by that I mean the United Nations General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council, which is the main body in charge, the Security Council, to bring an end to this kind of crimes and illegal actions. They have done very little. They have proven, the situation has proven that the United Nations Security Council has failed in its commandment to prevent this kind of atrocities from happening. And the same has been repeated. Many analysts say that what was happening in Gaza, the fact that the Israel, supported directly by the United States, were able to get away with that, represented the breakdown of the international system that would give the way for the United States to carry out attacks and violate with impunity international law, which is what happened and what has been happening for the past years, with the use of coercive illegal measures and sanctions, which, as we recall, according to international rule, only the United Nations Security Council is the only international body permitted to impose international sanctions on a foreign country, as we know, the United States does so at will, without any regards to international morality. And this all culminates, the breaking point came on the very early hours, very late into the night and early Saturday hours, when they attacked directly. They bombed both civilians and military targets in 4 different states of Venezuela, including the capital Caracas, targeting different, as we were saying, both civilians and military targets. And the authorities have reported that there are casualties, including children, among those victims of the civilian targets that were hit, but also the direct attack against a head of state of a sovereign nation, the kidnapping of a foreign head of state, the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Cilia Flores. As we know, this goes also against all international norms, as has been denounced by lawyers and experts and analysts, because the heads of states of any government of any country has immunity, and no one has the right to carry out this blatant, aggressive criminal attack as the United States did against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And since the early hours of Saturday, people in Venezuela have come out to the streets to denounce these actions, to condemn the impunity with which the United States goes about exercising their imperialist policies, because as has been said by the United States itself, it's not a secret, it's not a conspiracy. They have come out outright and say it. Their only goal is the oil of Venezuela, the oil reserve. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, and the United States wants that oil to have easy access, cheap access, and control the oil market and continue to be able to exercise their hegemony over the peoples of the world. And for that oil, they are committing all these criminal actions with impunity, because so far the international organizations, the United Nations Security Council, the organizations that are there established supposedly to safeguard the people, to safeguard the rule of law, of relations among the countries of the world, have failed to do so, and as a matter of fact, they have not condemned these actions still. There have been very timid statements expressing concern over the situation, calling for de-escalation, but the action itself has not been condemned as a whole outright with strength. And this gray area is also setting a very dangerous precedent. Not only the attack sets a dangerous precedent, but the reaction of these international organizations setting an even more dangerous precedent, because they are showing that they don't have the capability, they don't have the strength, perhaps even the will to reject these actions, to condemn these actions, and to face these actions and put an end to them, and to hold the people responsible committing these criminal actions to account, which is setting a very dangerous precedent, because after Venezuela, the only question that would remain is who can be next. And as we know, President Donald Trump has set direct threats against other governments, other nations in the region, as well as President Donald Trump has threatened both the Colombian president as well as Cuba. Was also threatened by President Donald Trump in his latest speeches, saying that those were situations that needed to be resolved and that they will be talking about it in the future. But going back to the images we're having live right now on our screen, we're seeing another demonstration of support. As we were saying, people came out en masse yesterday, and today they continue to do so, to come out en masse, to take to the streets, which is the call that was made to the people, to the social movements, to take to the streets, to fight for the return of law, the return of President Nicolas Maduro, the return of first combatant Cilia Flores back to Venezuela, the return back to the legality, of international legality, and calling for the respect of the UN Charter, and condemning the blatant U.S. attack against Venezuela, against the people of Venezuela, and in a way as well against the whole region, because as has been denounced by the authorities and by analysts and specialists, not only in Venezuela but across the world, this attack on Venezuela is not only an attack on Venezuela, it's an attack against the entire region, against the entire Latin American and Caribbean people, and against the declaration of the region of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We continue to see here the images. As we were saying, this is happening in Spain, right now in the capital of Madrid, in front of the U.S. Embassy, that people have gathered here to condemn the illegal actions of the United States. We also saw this kind of demonstration happening yesterday, for example, in the UK and in several other countries, that people gather in front of the U.S. embassies to denounce the criminal actions being committed by the United States against Venezuela. And not only this is happening across European countries, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America and the Caribbean, where people have expressed their rejection of the U.S. action and expressed their support with the Venezuelan people, with the Bolivarian Revolution, the elected government of Venezuela. Also, from within the United States itself, there have been many critical voices denouncing the illegality of the United States actions, of the Trump administration action against Venezuela, denouncing the fact that not only goes against international law, but also against the U.S. Constitution itself, as the United States, Trump carried out this attack without the approval of Congress, and in the States, only Congress can approve a military attack to any sovereign nation. But this is the situation that is happening right now. For today, the United Nations Security Council, yesterday many voices were calling for an urgent emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council to address the situation in Venezuela. And this meeting is going to happen today at a later hour, which of course will have all the latest details happening of that meeting of the United Nations Security Council here on teleSUR. So stay tuned for that, to be updated on everything that is happening at the United Nations and to listen to the positions of the different permanent representatives and the declarations that are going to take place at the United Nations Security Council. And also for today, later as well in the day, it is scheduled for 2 p.m. local time, Brazil. President Lula da Silva called for an emergency meeting of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, also to address the situation in Venezuela, to address the latest criminal actions of the United States against a people of Latin America. As we recall, all this began way back when Trump returned to power and assumed the presidency for his second term, and very quickly he began to accuse Venezuela of different crimes without providing any evidence, and began to weave a narrative that was denounced by Venezuela itself, by the authorities and by governments of the world and authorities of the world, a narrative that was only leading to what happened, unfortunately, yesterday on early hours of Saturday. First, we must recall that he began to weave the narrative, the history, without any evidence that the Tren Aragua was an issue in Venezuela, was an issue in the United States, and it was the Venezuelan government's fault. Tren Aragua, we must recall, that was defeated in Venezuela ways back and was completely dismantled. But once that narrative did not stick, did not work, that's when they changed to the salt cartels, the cartels de los soles, and began to weave the narrative of drug trafficking, a narrative that itself collapsed on its own, but not because the Venezuelan government denounced them to be false with evidence, because the United States intelligence services themselves, the United Nations reports on drugs, yearly reports on drugs, they all show that Venezuela has nothing to do with drug production, and even less with the drug issue that the United States is experiencing. But the United States used this as a scapegoat, of course, to divert attention from all the issues that it's facing within the United States, and to blame the other guy, as people say, to blame the Venezuelan, to be able to, without any evidence, without any proof, to be able to justify the actions that are not, that the people within the United States itself reject. Polls have shown that over 70% of the people in the United States reject any kind of military action against Venezuela. They reject any kind of new war against a foreign country for oil. They reject the shedding of blood for oil. They have expressed their condemnation within the United States to these military actions, to these illegal actions against a sovereign country, because as we saw yesterday, many people saying the United States has more important issues than instead of solving those issues, they are focusing on the natural resources. But of course, we must understand that the way that the United States political system works, that the interest of the political system in the United States is not exactly the interest of its people, it's the interest of the transnationals, the lobbyists, the powerful lobbyists, the money that is behind all those lobbies that controls the policy making of that North American nation. We continue to see live the images in Spain of the people on the streets denouncing and condemning the attacks, that that the United States carried out on early hours of Saturday against Venezuela and the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores, and they are of course demanding the return of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores back to Venezuela. This is happening as people across the world, not only Spain, are expressing their support for the Venezuelan people. They are expressing that they are with the Venezuelan people, that they feel with them, and they are willing to fight with them and to face all these situations that are happening in this scenario that right now they are experiencing. Unfortunately, this is the message that has been told by the world, a message to very loud and clear to the Venezuelan people that they are not alone. The people of the world, social movements, humanitarian organizations, they are rallying and sending a clear message to Venezuelans that they are not alone, in this struggle, and they are also sending a very clear message not only to Venezuela but to the United States itself, saying that what happened is not allowed, is illegal, and this kind of action must be put to a stop. And that's why the people are on the streets demanding the respect for sovereignty, demanding the respect to the right of self-determination of the people, demanding a return to international legality and the return of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores back to the homeland of Bolivar, back to Venezuela, where they should have never been taken from in the first place. Whereas we were saying, social movements, people by the hundreds, in this case in Spain, as we were seeing in the images, we saw a very large demonstration yesterday in Havana. As soon as the news was heard, people gathered very quickly, and a demonstration was called in support of Venezuela. People gathered, and by the thousands they gathered at the Anti-Imperialist Tribune right there in the iconic Malecon of La Habana to denounce and condemn the imperialist actions of the United States against Venezuela. And the same happening, as we were saying, in different areas across the world, where people have expressed also their rejection to the criminal actions of the United States and their support for the Venezuelan people, their support for the Bolivarian government. And of course, in Venezuela itself, people have stayed on the streets since the very early hours of Saturday, and overnight they held vigils across different cities and Bolivar squares of the country, and they have announced that they will remain on the street in a permanent struggle until their president and first combatant are returned back safely to Venezuela. People on the streets of Caracas have been denouncing all day yesterday and during the night, and now in these early hours of Sunday, they remain on the streets denouncing the illegality, denouncing that they don't want the United States to govern over Venezuela, denouncing that reaffirming that the natural wealth that Venezuela has, that was granted by nature, belong to Venezuelans, and that no one will ever take away the natural resources, the wealth of the Venezuelan soil away from Venezuelans' hands, because it's where they belong to. So people continue to be on the streets denouncing these illegal and criminal actions coming from the United States against Venezuela, as they continue to defend and reaffirm their will to protect the sovereignty of the nation, their right to life, and their right to self-determination, and their right to carve out their own path to their own prosperity. We must recall that all this is happening as Venezuela was flourishing as ever, because as we know, in the late 2016, 2017, 2018, and during the pandemic starting in 2019, the United States carried out one of the strongest offensive, we could say, in terms of economic sanctions to try to collapse the Venezuelan economy, to force a regime change back then. But thanks to the strategies and decision-making and correct economic policies that were set out by the Bolivarian government, the Bolivarian Revolution, Venezuela has been able to overcome those obstacles. As per international organizations and reports, Venezuela registered the biggest economic growth last year, 2025, in the entire continent, in the entire region. Venezuela was the country that grew the most, following the different strategies in terms of the economy and the planning with the 14 engines and the 7 T plans, the 7 transformation plan, which made Venezuela it made it, and it's becoming, because there's still, as always the authorities have said, there's still much more to do. It has made Venezuela a production powerhouse and go away and separated themselves from the dependency of oil. We must recall that Venezuela was a country that was fully dependent on its oil's revenues, but following the sanctions and the fact that they lost pretty much 99% of those oil revenues due to the illegal coercive sanctions imposed by the United States against Venezuela, they found alternatives, they found new strategies, and Venezuela today has become a powerhouse of production, not only in the oil, which the industry was being recovered bit by bit, and it was producing more than ever, but also in food production. We are hearing statements happening right now at the rally. Let's listen to them.
And of carrying the hope of victory, facing the imperialism and facing the accomplice silence of the European Union and the government of the Reign of Spain, it corresponds to us, to the working class and the peoples of the world, to raise very high the flag of solidarity that is internationalist, that can only be anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist, and anti-fascist. Imperialist hand out of Venezuela and of Latin America. Long live the resistance and the solidarity, the international solidarity of the peoples. No to NATO. Out bases.
We're seeing the people chant very loudly, "Out NATO." They want the bases out.
We do not want to be a North American colony. We do not want it. We do not want to be a North American colony. Hands off Venezuela.
But we're seeing the participants here at the rally sending a very clear message of what they are demanding, not only of the United States but also of the Spanish government. They want hands off Venezuela and they want NATO gone from the country. Protesters continue to chant, "Imperialism is the true terrorism in the world." And we're saying people have continued to be here chanting different slogans denouncing the imperialist actions of the United States.
Out Yankees of Latin America. The lady was expressing that we have.
So as we're saying, the people gather with clear chants, with clear slogans denouncing the imperialist actions of the United States against Venezuela, with clear messages saying hands off Venezuela, and also denouncing the NATO bases they are demanding from Spain. And this has been happening since yesterday. Different Spanish sectors, political parties as well, are demanding Spain to break off any alliances with the United States in the face of the illegal actions that the United States committed against Venezuela, saying that they are not a country worth of trust. They are not a country worth to be called an ally, and that's why they are demanding an end to also any kind of alliances with the United States, an end to the partnership with NATO, to expel all NATO bases from the country, as they see them as a threat to their own sovereignty, because if the United States did that to Venezuela, they can do that to any country in the world, including their own, including Spain in this case, where people are demanding an end to these alliances, an end to NATO in Spain, and an end to the relationship of the Spanish government with the criminal government of the administration of Donald Trump. They are calling the people here, we were saying the representative of the rally here, calling for this is the moment to raise the flags of solidarity among peoples of the world, raise the flags of solidarity with Venezuela to make it clear, loud and clear to the people, to the politicians, to the people in power making all these decisions to overtake and in disregard the legality of international order and take over the natural resources of foreign nation, to send a clear message to all that political structure that the peoples will be on the streets denouncing and protecting, denouncing the actions and protecting the rights, the right of the peoples of the world to self-determination, to life, and to be able to decide for themselves the path to follow. We also saw many during these last hours, we saw many expressions of support, not directly to the Bolivarian Revolution itself, for example, but because many voices are coming out, even voices that may not see eye to eye with the policies of the Bolivarian Revolution, but they denounce the illegal action, the criminal act, the violation of international law, which is very serious and very important that this is denounced and this is put to a stop, because this present that is being said by the United States, this blatant disregard, the attack against a sovereign nation, the kidnapping, not only the attack but the direct kidnapping of the president in office and the first combatant, sets a very dangerous precedent if the people responsible for these criminal actions are not held to account, because it's sending the message that now is the time of the rule of the jungle. This where the most powerful, the one with the stronger military force, can decide what happens and not completely disregarding the will of the people, the interest of the people, and what the people have decided. So we continue to be here live with images in Spain, as we were saying here in the capital, Madrid, where you were seeing that people have gathered here by the hundreds in front of the U.S. Embassy to denounce the criminal actions that the United States carried out against Venezuela. We continue to see people here chanting slogans, as we were listening just a moment ago, sending a clear message saying hands off Venezuela, hands off Latin America, because people are also denouncing that this attack against Venezuela is not only an attack against Venezuela, but also an attack against the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. This is happening right now as we speak live in Spain, Madrid, and demonstrations like this, like the one taking place as we're seeing in Madrid, which is very large in number, also took place in different countries around the world. In all 5 continents, people have taken to the streets very quickly to denounce the illegality of the action. As we were saying, these criminal actions committed by the United States, which began when President, well, it began way back, but this latest escalation of aggression, we could say this latest escalation of aggression that led to this military action began with the return to office of President Donald Trump, where from the very early moments of his new term, he began to attack Venezuela directly, not militarily, but with sanctions and more harsh policies and the strengthening of this economic siege that has been imposed against Venezuela for years now, since the Bolivarian Revolution began, since Commander Hugo Chavez came to power in the late 1990s. And as we have seen throughout the years, throughout history, this latest escalation led to this situation, this military attack, the direct use of force by the United States military. We've seen throughout the last years, we saw the United States try to use proxy operations, mercenaries, going through Colombia, through other areas to try to create violence and destabilize the nation from within. But this latest escalation arrived to the direct use of military force, as we saw on the early hours of Saturday, with the use of over 150 warplanes were involved, between drones, fighter jets, helicopters were involved in a precision, full-scale attack against different targets in Venezuela, and a overwhelming use of force to create this shock, the surprise attack, the shock within the Venezuelan ranks, and the use of special forces to kidnap the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores from their residence. And this is the situation that the world is right now. On Sunday, over 24 hours after the criminal military actions that the United States committed against Venezuela, people are moving, are exercising their right to protest, and are expressing that they are there with Venezuela, with the people of Venezuela, as we are seeing here in this particular case in Spain. People are in Spain on the streets saying that Venezuela is not alone, saying hands off Venezuela, hands off the Latin America and the Caribbean, saying that is the moment for the peoples of the world to raise their flag of solidarity and express their unity, express their willingness to stand next to the brotherly people of Venezuela, a people of peace, as has been said by many, not only within Venezuela but also outside Venezuela, a country that wants peace, that wants to develop under its own term, that wants to carry out with its own projects for the benefit of its people, which is the path that Venezuela is on, that is currently on, as we were talking, that Venezuela has registered the greatest economic growth in the past year, in the country with the greatest economic growth of the entire region. So we continue to be here live in Madrid, as people continue to express their support for the Venezuelan people, for the peaceful Venezuelan people. A people in Venezuela has always expressed that they want peace, that they don't want war. They want to be left alone, to be able to develop, to be able to prosper as they were doing, to be able to decide for their own. They want to exercise their right to self-determination and decide on their own what's best for Venezuela. As many people, analysts and specialists have said, any issue that Venezuela has is an issue for Venezuelans to resolve. It's not, no one has given the mandate, the jurisdiction to a third country, in this case the United States, to come out and decide for them what to do, what policies to implement, and what is the path for Venezuela as a nation. That's something that's being rejected not only within Venezuela, that has been rejected for over years now and has been denounced, but people continue across the world. People, as we were saying here in Madrid, are on the street denouncing the interference of the United States in Venezuela and denouncing the illegal actions of the United States, not only in Venezuela, in the world. As we know, the United States has been involved in interferences across many countries in all continents of the world. And this is being denounced once more here very strongly in Madrid. We were saying that later in the day there's going to be the urgent emergency meeting that was called yesterday by many actors, many political actors and peoples of the United Nations Security Council. Is going to take place later today, this Sunday, where the illegalities of these actions is going to be discussed. The situation in Venezuela is going to be discussed. Yesterday, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed concern to the current situation of it happening in Venezuela, but really failed to condemn the illegality of the actions of the United States against Venezuela. And also later in the day today, on this Sunday, there's going to be a virtual conference of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states that was called by the community of Latin American and Caribbean states that was called by Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, who called for this emergency meeting of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states to address the current situation that is happening in Venezuela. As we saw, this situation has been denounced not by President of Brazil itself, by the President of Colombia, President of Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum was very quickly Brazil itself, by the President of Colombia, President of Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum was very quickly to come out and condemn the illegality of these actions, to denounce the illegality of the actions of the United States, and to demand the return to international international legality, the return of President Nicolas Maduro, first combatant Celia Flores. Countries around the world expressed very strongly their support. Governments very quickly, Turkey, China, Russia, Iran, different nations around the world in different continents expressed in Africa, expressed their support for the people of Venezuela, for the Bolivarian government, the elected government of Venezuela, and called for the immediate return to international legality and the return of President Nicolas Maduro, first combatant Celia Flores, and for the respect of the sovereignty and independence and right to self-determination of the Venezuelan people, and an end to the illegal actions, military aggression, and criminal attacks of the United States against Venezuela, against the people of Latin America, against the region as a whole, in a way against the world, because they're saying that no one in the world, with the United States actions, no one in the world is safe from their greed. Whenever the message that the Trump administration is sending is that whenever a country has a natural resource or something that they want, they will use military force to get it, in complete disregard to any international legality, to the UN Charter, to any norm that rules over the relationship between nations, between states. That's why this is setting a very dangerous precedent if it is not faced with the correct reaction, with the correct condemnation, with the correct use of all the international mechanisms and tools. And if these international mechanisms and organizations do not exercise their responsibilities, the reason why they were made of, if they do not protect the international legality that governs over the international system itself, the international system itself is going to start to collapse. So we continue here live in listening to different, we're seeing the images of different moments, different situations happening across the world. We're seeing different protests taking place. People on the streets are denouncing the illegal actions of the United States.
Esto es una pelea geopolítica de poderes políticos a nivel mundial. Llegamos acá centenares de personas a rechazar la agresión que hoy sufre el pueblo venezolano, a exigir la libertad del presidente constitucional de Venezuela y de su esposa, y a exigir que salgan los yanquis de nuestra América Latina.
De igual manera, países como Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina y Brasil dieron su apoyo al pueblo venezolano frente a las embajadas estadounidenses en protestas al ataque y secuestro del presidente.
So we're seeing people, seeing different images of the protests taking place across different areas of the world. We are seeing demonstrations taking place in Spain on the right, and demonstrations taking place in other places across the world, as people, social movements of the world have gone out to support the situation, to support the Venezuelan people, to support the people in this moment of extreme danger. People have come out and continue to express their support for the people's right to self-determination. Because as we have seen, the United States reporting, and we have been reporting, the United States committed this illegal criminal aggression against the people of Venezuela, against the elected government of Venezuela.
En medio de esta escalada imperialista amenazante contra un pueblo de paz, democrático y soberano, los ciudadanos de los países como El Salvador, México,
So we're seeing people both also in El Salvador, in Panama, in different countries in the region also took to the streets during Saturday to denounce the illegal actions of the United States and to defend the sovereignty of the nation, to defend the sovereignty of Venezuela. So we continue to see images of the different protests that are taking place in different countries of the world, in different regions of the world, demanding an end to the illegal criminal actions of the United States against Venezuela. We continue to go back to the live images in Spain who are gathered here in front of the U.S. Embassy to denounce, as we were saying, the illegal actions of the United States against Venezuela. We've seen them here gathered for a while. We're seeing them in the hundreds, as we're seeing, gathered here in front of the U.S. Embassy with different chants, with different slogans calling for an end, calling for, screaming, hands off Venezuela, hands off Latin America. So this is taking all part of the world's solidarity with the Venezuelan people, with the Venezuelan government in the face of the criminal actions taken by the U.S. empire against Venezuela, which right now Venezuela is standing strong as well. Venezuela right now, as has been announced by the authority, is standing strong. The institutionality of Venezuela remains strong, and the people of Venezuela remain strong, who remains on the streets, as we have been reporting. They were holding vigils across different Bolivar squares at night. They remain on vigils with, as they will say, that they will remain on the streets to defend and support the Venezuelan government and support the sovereignty of the nation. So these are images of Spain right now. People, as we were saying, have been here in Spain, in Madrid, in front of the U.S. Embassy, gathered, expressing their support for the Venezuelan people, a support that has been expressed not only in Spain, but as we have been reported, the world as a whole. The peoples of the world, the people of the global south have come out to support the people of Venezuela.
En su país y que transmite al mundo, porque siempre dentro de sus discursos está la palabra paz y sin lugar a duda está también la palabra resiliencia. Venezuela es un pueblo totalmente
So the word
resiliente.
that remains clear here is the word of peace. The people are calling and demanding the return of peace. They are demanding to protect the peace of the Venezuelan people. As we were saying, in Venezuela, as I sum it up, Venezuela faced the military aggression, the illegal military aggression of the United States. The military aggression of the United States against Venezuela that happened in the early hours of Saturday, with the carrying out of bombings in different targets across states of Venezuela. The targets were both civilians and military. They were not only military targets, they also attacked different civilian targets, and the authorities have reported casualties, unfortunately, among these civilian targets that were hit as well. And it all ended with the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Cilia Flores, in complete disregard to any kind of international law, in complete disregard as well with the Constitution of the United States itself, as Trump exercised this, carried out this criminal, illegal action, military action, unilaterally, without the consent of the proper U.S. channels, which is Congress, which is the one that has the authority to authorize any kind of foreign military intervention. And from the very moment, of course, the authorities of Venezuela have denounced and condemned these actions. They also announced that the institutionality of Venezuela, the government of Venezuela, remains strong, remains firm, and they will continue to carry out the struggle, and they will continue to exercise, to implement all the necessary strategies in all international arenas and all the international space where this is supposed to be resolved, because they also remain committed to peace. There's the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, now President in charge, Delcy Rodriguez, was very clear on the position of Venezuela, that they remain strong, they remain committed to peace, and they remain committed to dialogue, but also they are ready to defend Venezuela for any threat necessary, by any means necessary, to defend the Venezuelan people, to defend the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people from any kind of aggression. And Venezuela has been shown that it's not alone. People from across the world, from every part of the world, have come out to express their solidarity with Venezuela. We saw the people in Latin America and many in different Latin American countries and in the Caribbean as well to come out in strength to denounce the criminal actions of the United States and to stand with the Venezuelan people, together with them as they continue their struggle to condemn and denounce the illegal actions of the United States and continue to demand the immediate release of President Nicolas Maduro and the return to the Venezuelan territory. Clear slogans that are predominating all these protests that are taking place across the globe are the call for peace, the condemnation of the imperialist actions of the United States, a clear call of the United States to leave alone the peoples of the world, to go back to their own country and deal with their own issues, and leave the peoples of the world alone in peace to exercise their full sovereignty, to exercise their right to self-determination, without the interference of any imperialist hegemon. As also has been reported, and China were among the first to express their support and their willingness, their commitment to continue strengthening the strategic partnership of cooperation with Venezuela, especially in these dire moments of military threats that are being exercised by the United States against Venezuela. And people across the world as well have continued to denounce this situation. We are seeing now are the images in Spain, as we were saying, in front of the US Embassy in the capital in Madrid, sending a clear message that this is the moment. This is the moment of solidarity of the peoples. This is the moment that the peoples of the world must come together and support each other, help each other, and accompany each other in these very dark moments that the world is experiencing, is seeing a resurgence of neo-fascism in very far-right governments across the world, especially in neo-fascist policies that are being implemented by the Trump administration in regards to their foreign policies with the relations with other nations of the world, but through the use of threats. We must recall that the threats of this new term of the Donald Trump administration did not only begin with this military threat, which later ended with the military aggression of Venezuela. From the very beginning, his threats were also made in the economic field with the implementation of tariffs against governments that were not to his liking. If a government was implementing policies that was not in his interest, he would threaten these governments with absurd high policies, and also to force the use of verbal deals in his favor, with the threat of imposition of very high tariffs. So we continue to stay here. We continue to report what is happening across the world as the people are demonstrating, the people are protesting and expressing their support for the Venezuelan people, their support for the right to self-determination of the Venezuelan people, and their rejection of the criminal illegal actions, and also a call to the own governments in the different countries where these demonstrations are taking place, to a call to their own governments to exert pressure to speak out and condemn these illegal actions, and a clear call to the international organizations, to the so-called international community, to exercise and to carry out their duty and make the international and enforce the international legality that rules over the relationships among states. We must recall that the actions of the Trump administration goes directly in violation of different articles of the UN Charter, which is the threat of use of force and the use of force, the direct use of force against a sovereign nation to not only take over the natural resources of that nation as if we were in the times of the colonies, but also to force a regime change in a democratic country where an election was held, where the people of Venezuela elected freely, transparently, the their president, the government that they wanted for their nation. We must recall that the electoral system in Venezuela is one of the safest, the most secure and transparent there is in the world, thanks to the different verification system it has, the horseshoe system that it has, that provides all the necessary information to make sure that the election is held in accordance to international standards. And as been said by many people, by many experts and electoral observers that have gone to Venezuela to observe elections, I don't think there is a country in the world that does more election than Venezuela. In Venezuela, everything is done through elections. Everything, the power of Venezuela has been so democratized, which is part of the model that is being built right now by the Bolivarian Revolution, which is to make sure that the people have a true representation, they have a true say in the direct policy making of the nation, in the decision making of the country, and they have a true participation. And we've seen that with the new models of political administration that are being developed. Especially we see that with the implementation of the communes in Venezuela, which is an important way of political organization to make sure that people have more power, have more direct say in the policies and in the investments that are done in the different communes and society in accordance to the needs of every specific area.